NASCAR's recent implementation of the Open Exemption Provisional (OEP) regulation has sparked an eruption of criticism among the racing industry, especially amongst current and previous drivers who seem to have taken a stance against NASCAR. Most notably, Denny Hamlin, who is already in a big fight with NASCAR, is the one to sharply criticize NASCAR's new regulation, which is due to debut at the 2025 Daytona 500, calling it a desperate ploy to make headlines and enhance viewership. The Open Exemption Provisional allows top drivers from other racing disciplines to compete in NASCAR Cup Series races without having to go through the conventional qualifying process. This regulation change marks a substantial adjustment in NASCAR's driver eligibility policy, with far-reaching repercussions for the sport's competitive landscape. The new OEP rule allows teams to request a provisional entry for a world-class driver 90 days before a race. If approved, this provisional ensures the driver a berth in the starting lineup, even if they do not qualify via traditional means. The rule allows for only one OEP to be used per race, and if enacted, it would increase the field to 41 cars, rather than the regular 40 without any sort of qualification. Have a big name and you're in seems to be the way NASCAR want to operate. Is this just another ploy to get the ratings back up again? And which world-class driver would want to line up for a race? Can you see Lewis Hamilton or perhaps a Marc Marquez line up for a NASCAR race? It is crucial to note that if a driver enters a race using the OEP, they will give up the potential to collect championship points or prize money. This restriction is most likely meant to ensure fairness for full-time NASCAR racers, while still allowing for the inclusion of high-profile guest drivers. The OEP's first deployment will take place at the 2025 Daytona 500, with four-time Indianapolis 500 winner Helio Castroneves expected to profit from the new rule. Trackhouse Racing successfully requested and received a provisional for Castroneves, assuring his participation in NASCAR's most prestigious event. Denny Hamlin, a three-time Daytona 500 winner and co-owner of 23 Quelpin Racing, has expressed strong opposition to the OEP. Speaking at Bowman Gray Stadium prior to the cookout clash, Hamlin expressed his displeasure with the new regulation. Hamlin's criticism focuses on a few significant aspects. First, he sees the OEP as NASCAR's obvious attempt to make headlines and draw attention to the sport. He believes that this method puts short-term gains ahead of NASCAR's long-term health and integrity. Okay, well, it exists. I know it. Just to me, it's a short-term gain, long-term loss. I just think that you're the premier stock car series in the US, the premier racing sport in the US, be the big boys, and force people to come in here and get their credentials and do it the natural way. Hamlin argues that the OEP diminishes NASCAR's prestige by allowing drivers to skip the regular qualification process. He believes that gaining a berth in a NASCAR race, particularly the Daytona 500, should demonstrate a driver's competence and dedication to the sport. While Hamlin recognizes that the OEP is likely to have the greatest influence on the Daytona 500, he is concerned about the precedent it establishes for the sport as a whole. He thinks that this rule change will diminish the hard work and dedication required to compete at NASCAR's elite level. I don't think it's going to be a big factor really anywhere other than Daytona. But just simply put, saying that someone has a name that interests you and that they're going to have an automatic bid into the highest form of motorsports in the US, I don't love it. It's worth mentioning that not all drivers share Hamlin's views on the OEP. Ryan Blaney, for example, has expressed excitement at the prospect to compete against Helio Castroneves in the Daytona 500. Blaney's upbeat approach is motivated by his personal relationship to Castroneves, with whom he had competed on Team Penske. I might be biased. I love Helio, so I was psyched when it was like, okay, he's running the 500. Oh, and he's locked in. It's great for Helio, because he was in IndyCar when I was over there at Penske for a while before he moved on. So I love Helio, and I'm happy that I'm going to be able to race against him because I loved growing up watching him. Chase Elliott, NASCAR's most popular driver, has adopted a more measured approach to the issue. Elliott recognizes the promotional value of having well-known drivers from other racing disciplines compete in NASCAR events. However, he expresses concern about the prestige and integrity of qualifying for major races, such as the Daytona 500. You would hate to have a Helio Castroneves or a Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton or someone come in to run a race and then miss the show due to something silly. So, I can certainly see that aspect of it from a promoter side of things, where you wouldn't want to risk that because that's obviously going to be a big deal for you. However, Elliott also warns against preserving NASCAR's legacy. With prestigious races, there should be some sort of integrity with making the show. I think that's part of what makes the race prestigious. It's a hard event to make. You see that with the Indianapolis 500. It's a big deal just to get in the show. Elliott added that, while he believes the OEP is completely acceptable, he does not want to ever degrade or hurt our long-term integrity as a sport, or take the prestige out of events that should be some of our biggest days of the year. Kyle Busch sees possible benefits from the OEP rule. He sees it as a unique opportunity to bring new talent and fans to NASCAR. Busch believes that bringing in drivers such as Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton will increase excitement and broaden NASCAR's audience. I think it's a unique ruling or statute that could benefit the sport as a whole, Busch said. It just kind of depends on how it's used. I'm still a little fuzzy on all of the details of it. Busch also highlighted the possible marketing advantages of the OEP. I don't take exception to it. I think there's a money factor there too. I think that's fine. It's literally just to bring eyeballs to our sport, their fans, their demographic of where they come from, and whether they're from a different country, which Castroneves is. Maybe make some fans. NASCAR sees the OEP as part of a larger campaign to re-energize the sport and generate enthusiasm around major events. John Probst, NASCAR's Senior Vice President of Racing Development, has stated that the regulation is intended to inject additional enthusiasm into races and potentially draw a larger viewership. I think it's meant to create energy around a particular race. It's meant to energize our sport and bring in some excitement. To address concerns about the impact on veteran NASCAR drivers, the sanctioning body stated that non-full-time NASCAR racers can also use the OEP. This means that drivers like Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex Jr. could use the provisional if they enter certain events. As the Open Exemption Provisional (OEP) rule makes its debut at the 2025 Daytona 500, the discussion over its impact on NASCAR's future heats up. Will this change succeed in recruiting new viewers and generating excitement? Or will it eventually diminish the status of starting in NASCAR's biggest races? While Denny Hamlin worries about the long-term ramifications, Kyle Busch and others see a chance to broaden NASCAR's reach by bringing in world-class racers. But at what cost? Could this rule eventually result in an inflow of guest drivers, limiting prospects for full-time NASCAR competitors? Will additional high-profile stars from Formula One, IndyCar, or endurance racing be lured to make appearances, resulting in eye-catching moments, but perhaps disturbing the competitive balance? And what about the fans? Do they want to see famous drivers from other disciplines join NASCAR? Or do they believe the old qualifying system should be preserved? Most importantly, if this regulation is successful, how far would NASCAR go to make exceptions for superstars? Could we expect additional changes to long-held practices in the sake of entertainment? The OEP regulation is only the beginning, but is it the start of something fantastic, or the start of NASCAR losing its identity? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.